Hello, everyone, and welcome to my channel. This is Vidhi. For those who are new to my channel, I work in Australia as a associate professor, and in this month of March, I'm going to launch a series of daily webinars covering various aspects of research. And I hope this is useful for anyone who is in at any stage of their research. So today is the first session, and today I'm going to talk about how to read a PhD thesis fast. So the idea is what information you should be looking for or searching for when you are reading a thesis, because thesis can be is quite a large document. So reading something and reading it accurately and reading it in a very efficient manner is very important if you are doing a research or if you're doing your PhD. So we will start today on that topic. But before we begin, I also want to show you all the upcoming webinars on this topic. So what I'm calling this is March Towards Your Research Excellence with me in March 2024. So take this time to listen to my webinars, daily webinars on various topics, various aspects of research. I'll be giving you important tips. I'll be sharing with you experience that I have gathered over so many years in terms of doing research as well as supervising PhD students. So over 25 students I have supervised in Australia completing their PhD with me. So on the screen here, you can see all the different webinars that are coming up in the next over this month, and they range from like how to do a research proposal, how to apply for PhD admission in Australia. If you want to do a postdoc, I'm going to cover that. How to read a journal paper, how to liaise with your research supervisor, how to conduct industry-focused research, and so on. So the complete 31 days in March, I will have one new topic that I would like to share with you. And I hope you join these regular sessions and share this with your colleagues and friends who may benefit from this initiative. Okay, so I would like to start off with today's session, and today I'm going to talk about reading a PhD thesis. So first and foremost is to understand what does a PhD, a typical or a standard PhD thesis contain, right? So there are, if you take any PhD thesis, the table of contents should have more or less something along these lines. So you would have an abstract for every thesis. You will have a chapter on introduction, literature review, which is then followed by methodology, then results. Then we go on to a chapter on discussion, limitations, future work, conclusion, and finally references. Plus, sometimes you also have appendix. So that is pretty much layout that any thesis should have. The chapter names can change, the content of the chapters could change, but more or less this is what is required in a PhD thesis. So no matter how you name the chapters or name the sections and subsections within the chapter, this is basically all that is required when you are drafting a thesis. So when we are reviewing a PhD thesis, and this could be for many reasons. So one of the most important reason why you have taken a thesis and you're reading it is because you want to, maybe you're starting your PhD. That could be one reason why you're doing this. And you want to know what has been done in your field, and you have come across this thesis and you want to read it. But reading a thesis can take a fair amount of time, because it could range anywhere between 100 to 200 to 300 pages long. So looking or reading, for the reading, what is it that you should actually be looking for in a PhD thesis is what we are going to cover in today's session. And the objective here is that we spend a reasonable amount of time understanding what research has been done, and look for specific information from the thesis rather than reading the entire 200 300 page manuscript. I mean, that is not realistic, and it is not even not advisable, because there will be a lot of uh, content which is not going to specifically add to anything when you are in this early stages of literature review. So what are we looking for in a thesis? So when we open up a PhD a thesis, we can look at their, say, the research questions that they have identified, and we can analyze them, understand what kind of research they are planning to do. Some theses also mention a thesis statement, or we could call it as the broad objective of what the thesis is about. We then want to look into the literature review. What is covered in the in terms of the recent literature that they have covered in their thesis. We can look at the methodology that they have covered, followed by the results and the findings of the results. And if you can see, the layout of the thesis that I mentioned earlier is similar to the layout that that we are looking for here. Okay. So similarly, we look into the contributions in the field. What or where does this thesis make a genuine and important contribution? What innovative approaches or something new that they have developed in this thesis? What are some of the key terms and definitions that they may have covered or reported in this thesis? What limitations they have identified? What conclusions they have made? And also look at the reference list from their thesis, so that we can get an idea of any other literature that we may want to review. So if you look at this, imagine that you have a filter, right? You have a filter and you are pouring your the PhD thesis from that, and what you're getting is information like this: the research questions, the statement, the core findings, or the gap from the literature review, what methodology they have used, and so on and so forth. So this is the kind of information that you need to pick up or extract from the thesis that you are reviewing. So now that we understand that what we are looking for, it is also important to get a feeling or get an understanding of why we are doing this, right? Because when you are studying, when you're reviewing or reading a thesis, it has to be for some purpose. What is that purpose? So it could be that we want to understand what is the main essence of this research. Why had somebody spent 3 or 4 years of their life completing their PhD on this specific topic? So that is the essence of research. That is the first thing. The next thing is we want to assess the validity and the reliability. So when you are looking at a thesis from a critical analysis perspective, you want to see, or you want to analyze whether the research methodology is valid, is it reliable, is it rigorous or not. So you are criticizing, you are evaluating the research that has been done. Next, you want to look for is the significance of the findings. I mean, the research may be relevant. It may have they may have done some useful research in it, but you have to understand whether the findings that they have got from that are really significant or not. So all these are examples of what information you're looking for when you are browsing, when you are reading through a thesis. You can also understand the applicability and the implications of this research. It could also be for critical analysis. I mean, you're doing your literature review and you want to uh, evaluate the most relevant literature, and this thesis happens to be a part uh, of that uh, of that exercise. You can also look at research continuity. And this is important because when you start your research, if you are in the early stages of your research, you want to understand where the research has stopped, where this thesis has concluded their research, and where to from here. Where should this research be progressing further? So this is all the things kind of we are looking for when we are reading a thesis, and we have to be very efficient with our time so that we can extract or infer all this information through the thesis in a short amount of time. So before we actually go into one real life example of a thesis where I will walk you through the whole thesis, I would also want you to understand what we are not looking for. Like I said earlier on, a thesis is a very large document, and we have very limited time. So what is you have to understand what is required to be read, and what is it that you can kind of skip at the early stages of your research. So what are some of these things? So one of the thing is that you're not trying to understand each and every detail in the from the thesis. At this stage you are trying to get the main crux of this of the research, and so we don't need to go into the minute details of everything. Say for example, if the thesis is proposing a new algorithm or is proposing a new technology or a new model, you need to understand that the model exists. This is and it is designed to what is the purpose of developing that model. You don't need to understand how it works or the every nitty gritty of that model. Typically, when a thesis starts, there is an extensive background section or the introduction section. So you don't need to go into depth of understanding everything. As long as you have a cursory browse of the introduction and the background, that is sufficient. Next is appendices. We do not want to go at this stage and look at all the appendices that they have in their thesis. Next, methodological justifications. Maybe you want to understand what methodology they have used, and why they have used it, but you don't have to go and criticize or evaluate whether this methodology was the right methodology or not. At this moment, if you can understand that this is the research question, this is the methodology that they have used, and these are the findings that they have got, I think that is good enough and sufficient information to begin with. Next is you don't have to review or look at all each and every reference that is out there in their thesis. It could be maybe 100, 200 references in the thesis, so you don't have to go through all of them. Next, minor results in details. So when you start reading the results chapter, you can get a good understanding of the main findings. So you don't have to look at what is the each and every result or report that they are results that they're reporting in the thesis. And sometimes within the thesis, you will also see there is a lot of verbose descriptions and explanations, which you really do not need at this stage. So, yeah, so keep in mind, this is what we are not looking for at this stage when we are quickly reviewing a thesis. And these are the things that we are looking for when we are going to read a thesis. So I see there are a few comments here. So I'll take this a few seconds to just respond to those who have joined in. All right. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to walk you through a thesis that my PhD student just completed last year. And this thesis is titled Exploring Factors and Impact of Blockchain Technology Adoption in Food Supply Chain. So my student, his name is Abu Bakar Muhammad, and he completed his thesis in last year. So I will switch from this to my slide. But before we go to the thesis, I want to tell you that this is the topic for tomorrow's session. So if you are joining me tomorrow, I will be talking about how to draft a research proposal, all the different sections that a research proposal should have, and how you should write it. So do join me tomorrow. Now let's move to the thesis. So I have the thesis here. You can see the student's name, Abu Bakar, and this is the title of his thesis. So this was submitted in August 2023. I'll come to the abstract, but I want to show you the table of contents. And with the table of contents, the benefit is that typically most thesis content is more or less follows a similar standard like I told you earlier on. So there is a chapter on introduction. There's a chapter on literature review. There's a chapter on research methodology, qualitative analysis, content analysis, and conclusion. So in this thesis, the discussion, limitations, and the future work are all in the conclusion section, conclusion chapter. The other thing that you can also view is that typically you will have a declaration that this is your own piece of work, and then you have taken all possible the steps to ensure that there is nothing is in the thesis which has not been appropriately cited. You have abstract, you give some acknowledgements, you have a list of publications. If you have published papers, research or journal papers or conference papers during your thesis, during your PhD, then you list those publications as well. And do look out for this thing in the thesis that you are reviewing or reading, because this will also give you a quick idea of who are the other researchers who are working with, who have been involved in this research, and you can follow them or their work. Then you have table of contents, you have list of figures, tables, and any abbreviations that you have used. Okay, now I'll go to the abstract. So let's see what the abstract is. Globalization of food supply chain has resulted in significant challenges in food supply systems, such as food fraud, food safety, quality issues, food security due to information asymmetry. Globalization has also increased the complexity of food supply chain in production, shipping, and other operations. The complexity of the supply chain, however, raises the risk of product fraud and a failure of confidence among supply chain participants. So you can see what has happened in the first three lines is, first three sentences is that the problem has been identified and is been described here. Then what they have done, therefore, blockchain technology has proven to have a potential to transform food supply chain based on its potential benefits. BCT or blockchain technology promises to improve food supply chain processes. However, there is limited knowledge on the driving factors of blockchain adoption within the food supply chain, and the impact of blockchain technology on food supply chain processes. So what this is saying is, this is identifying the gap in the literature. So where is the gap? This is the gap. Therefore, this study explored blockchain adoption's key factors, impacts, and challenges. So this is the contribution of this thesis. And how is this achieved? Firstly, this study undertook a systematic literature review to understand the current knowledge on blockchain adoption within the food supply chain. This work was published in 2023 in IEEE Access Journal. So this is also something that you can do, because this gives the helps to build the credibility of the researcher, and very useful when the thesis goes for examination. Secondly, this study also adopts an exploratory qualitative research approach. So systematic literature review was one methodology in this thesis. The next is qualitative research. And the qualitative research was done using two sources. Firstly, there were interviews, 21 interviews, and then there was a content analysis done using 40 documents, which was white papers, news reports, and social media reports. And once that was done, thematic analysis was conducted to evaluate this qualitative data. And this then resulted into all these findings. The outcome, you can see based on this study, study develops a conceptual framework for blockchain adoption in food supply chain. And here is also mentioned that this was also published in another conference paper. So what you can see is, by reading the abstract, I get a very good and a reasonable understanding of what was the problem, which is kind of explained from here. Then the research gap, then the methodology. So the systematic literature review methodology and the qualitative research methodology. Those two methodologies are explained, and then the findings are reported. So by doing this, or by reading the abstract, I get a very good understanding of how or what I can expect when I read this thesis. Okay, so if a thesis is written if abstract is written properly, then just by reading the abstract, you will get to know the important things that you want to explore or understand by from that particular thesis. So these were the two journal articles that were published that came as a result of this thesis. Both are Q1, and then there was a research conference paper as well. So if you remember, what I told you earlier on is, when you are browsing or when you're reading a thesis, you want to get the key insights from that. So now for that, what you can do is, you can look at the table of contents, and then see what is it that you really want to know. So for example, research background, probably I don't want to know. I want to know the problem definition. I can jump to problem definition, and a problem definition actually gives some statistical information on how that defines the problem. So it says that it is anticipated that 8.5 billion people will be on Earth by 2023, 9.7 in 2020, 2050, and this. So these numbers are kind of kind of showing the potential size of the problem, and hence kind of positioning that this thesis is addressing a very important aspect and a very important problem. If you scroll down, I want to know what were the research objectives and the research questions. Okay, so the research here is to explore the factors influencing blockchain technology adoption in food supply chain. So if I were to start my research as a PhD candidate, I would pick up these three research questions, because I know that this thesis has investigated these three research questions, and then they would have some relevant findings. So to examine the impact of blockchain technology on food supply chain, to identify the significant challenges of adopting blockchain technology in food supply chain. Okay. So the study investigated the following research questions considering the research objectives. So you have research objectives, and then you also have research questions. So what factors influence the adoption of blockchain technology? So this was answered in this thesis. What are the impacts of blockchain technology on food supply chain? And what are the significant challenges of adopting blockchain technology in food supply chain? So this is also clearly, it's very clear the objectives of this thing. And the next thing that I have got here is overview of the methodology. And this is important because the introduction chapter should give a complete understanding or the flow of the entire thesis. And then for each and every thing, if you want to go in depth, you can go to the relevant chapter. For example, this is a section here on methodology. So here it talks about this thesis has used systematic literature review and qualitative, right? So I know that the methodology that this thesis has used are these two methodologies. So if I want to know, okay, what exactly did they do? You know, for example, in a systematic literature review, what were the keywords that they used? Where did they search which databases did they search? How many results they got? How did they screen the relevant publications and so on? Then I can go to the chapter where this is covered. Similarly, for qualitative study as well, in the introduction, I know that they have used a qualitative approach. They have conducted interviews, and if I want to know more about it, I can jump to that respective chapter. In terms of research contributions, here it does mention the publications that they have made. So this is also something that if you're writing your thesis, it is a good thing to include. Okay, so this is thesis structure. I think this is not something very relevant when you're reading a thesis for getting the relevant information. Literature review. So I'll go back to the table of contents again, because the navigation that way is easier. So first of all, I want to talk about the structure of the literature review chapter. So like I mentioned, sometimes thesis talks a lot about background and introduction. So within the literature, there is a section on introduction, introducing blockchain technology, providing some definitions. So basically explaining the background of this technology. Then we go on to review specific technology applications. So how is blockchain used in finance, in healthcare, in other sectors? Then we come to review of blockchain technology in food supply chain. So this is where the actual systematic literature review methodology is being applied. So there are some prior reviews. So if I'm in this field, I also want to know what are some of the recent papers, recent reviews that have been published. So I can jump here to prior reviews. And I can see there is a table here that shows quite a few existing reviews and the aims. What did that particular review article talk about? So for example, this was to review the application of blockchain in agribusiness, or this goal was to examine how blockchain technology and information or ICT have been used in agriculture. So different different reviews. Then we check the excuse me. Then we look at the methodology, and I can see here that this thesis follows Prisma for systematic literature reviews. These are some of the keywords that they have used. So if you are in this research area, one thing that you can do is you can copy this list of keywords, because if you are going to extend this research further, you need to be using those keywords that have been used in the literature. So like this example here. If you want to know what was the inclusion and exclusion criteria they have used, you can check this table. So this way, quality assessment, how did they do? What was the quality assessment approach they used? How many results they got? This is the typical figure that you would see in any SLR uh, document. And then it starts with the analysis of the results. So here you can see analysis of results is done based upon various things: impact of blockchain, challenges of blockchain, theoretical frameworks, limitations of the review, and review summary. The review summary would be something important for you to review when you are reading the thesis, because that will give you the whole the overall finding of the literature. Okay. Another thing that is relevant here, and I get my students to do it, is to write the future research directions, because this is important, especially for students who are going to start their thesis or their research now. They would want to know what do experts in the field suggest as the future directions of research. So having this section is also important because it kind of validates your research direction. So imagine you are writing your research proposal and you are proposing to conduct a research, or you have identified a research question. If you can back that up, that so and so thesis or so and so research paper mentioned that this was one of the important research that needs to be undertaken, then you kind of back yourself, your research that way. So that way it's very important. So next, if I want to look at, say, I know that this study used qualitative analysis. So they have conducted interviews. So how many interviews were there? There were 21 experts, for example. And they also followed snowballing sampling method, which means you ask your existing interviewees to recommend some other people that you can interview for your research. So they did that. How was the data analysis done? So they did thematic analysis. So another thing that you can also do is kind of search specific words. So for example, thematic analysis. So now I know that there are 18 references or instances of thematic analysis here, which means the most likely uh, approach that they have used for analysis is thematic analysis, and it was actually also mentioned in the abstract before. So using this search feature is also an easier way to fetch relevant information that you're looking for from your thesis, from the selected thesis. Okay. Now let's see qualitative analysis. So this was the qualitative analysis part. You can see participant demographic. So who did the interview? What were the position? Who were the people? So there was senior management, project managers, developers. Those are the ones who were interviewed. What was the interview time? So minimum time was 21 minutes, maximum was 48 minutes. Where was the interviews done? Mostly in Australia, but also from US, Canada, India, New Zealand, and so on. So this is also some information that you need when you are glancing through the thesis. What else do we have? Challenges. Then summary of this thesis. So you can see this is the core key findings from the qualitative analysis. The findings are consistent with other studies in adoption in food in blockchain technology adoption in food supply chains, because several parameters corroborate with the earlier studies. So in terms of technology, organizational, environmental factors, what was identified through interviews was aligned with the studies that were done earlier. So similarly, you can also look at the section on say content analysis. This is another qualitative approach, but here instead of interviews, the research other gray literature was used to identify the progress in the literature. So if you see here, one was the systematic literature review, which was done using existing academic literature, and then this chapter on content analysis is looking at literature that is non-academic, which means gray literature, which we call, and finding the similarity and disparities between those two is equally important, especially in certain fields like the one that is covered here. So having those two things together gives you a complete overall picture of the knowledge in this field, rather than being biased only on academic literature or being biased only towards the gray literature. Okay, and then see, if you look at the conclusion, the discussion gives you an idea of the what does the research mean, what can you really gather from this research. If they have proposed a framework, then you can say, okay, from this thesis, this framework is important. I will take this framework and keep a record of this framework in my collection, because I may need this framework if I'm going to extend this framework further, or if I'm going to develop something where this could be useful and relevant for me. So I can select and collect this information for my research. Then if you look at the limitations, limitations are also important, because this gives you idea on where and what you can do further. Because if these are the limitations of this study, your research can answer or solve these limitations. So you can, and that's how you kind of extend or move the research field forward. So looking at the limitations is important, and quickly find the limitations. For example, first is this, second is this, third limitation is here, fourth, and so on. So as a researcher, the quicker way would be to look for this. So this could also be something that you can do, like you do Control F and search first, second, third, fourth, and things. So that way you can quickly find the relevant information that you need, and then you can move forward. Same thing can be applied for future work as well. First, second, third, fourth, there is fifth here, sixth, and so on, like this. So what I wanted to show today was that you can read a thesis and how to read it in a reasonably fast manner. And the reason I say it is a reasonably fast manner is, if you know what information to extract from a thesis, then you will only look for that information specifically, and then it will be a very targeted approach. So you know that, okay, I have this thesis, I need to identify these 5 or 6 things or 10 things from this. Let me start one by one, collect that information, put it in my notes, and then move on to the next thesis. Okay, so that is the best way to kind of move to kind of progress with your with your thesis, with your reading of your thesis. Okay, so I hope this was helpful to you all. And if you are kind of in a stage where you are starting to read some thesis, follow these some of these guidelines, instructions that I have provided you. And remember that what you are looking for in the thesis is this kind of information. So you get this information from one thesis, and as you read more and more other thesis, you will be more comfortable finding this information in a much faster way, and your speed will then eventually or gradually increase. Also keep in mind that these are the things that we are not looking for in the first instance, because think about this. When you are picking up a thesis, you don't really know whether this thesis is going to be relevant or not. So you have to do that first level of screening to see whether you should spend more time reading this thesis further or not. And that's why this is a very important step, where you look for important information like this, and then use that as a basis to decide whether or not you want to study this in more detail or not. Okay, so that is all for today's session. I hope it is useful. I don't see any questions here. If there are any questions, please do ask me now. If not, you can always leave comments online, and I will do my best to respond to all your questions. Okay, so that's all in today's session. Today was the first session. So again, a reminder, tomorrow I'm going to talk about how to draft a research proposal. So do join me again at the same time, and keep your questions ready if you have. It will be a very interesting and enjoyable and engaging session tomorrow. So that's all from me. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, and tune in tomorrow at the same time, and we'll talk about the second topic, which is how to draft a research proposal. I have a plan for the next, for the whole of this month, on what I'm going to talk about on the different topics. But if you have any specific topic that you would want me to cover, please let me know in the comments, and then I will schedule those in the upcoming sessions. So thank you very much, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.